Welcome to ThinkTech on OC16, Hawaii's weekly newscast on things that matter to tech and to Hawaii. I'm Jay Fidel.
And I'm Duke Oishi.
The Dalai Lama is an extraordinary religious leader. In our show, we'll cover his recent trip to Hawaii.
We'll hear some of the comments he made and try to analyze his message and where he fits in the modern world.
The Dalai Lama, or Tenzin Gyatso, is the 14th Dalai Lama. His devotees think of him as the latest reincarnation of a series of spiritual leaders who have chosen to be reborn in order to enlighten others.
He was the head of state of Tibet until he was exiled in 1959. He may be the last Dalai Lama. The Chinese government does not recognize him and claims that only it has the authority to select the Dalai Lama.
As an exile, he travels the world, delivering his message of peace and enlightenment to an enormous number of people, especially students and young people. He has received many awards, including the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989. He wrote his autobiography, Freedom in Exile, in 1990. He also has his own page on Facebook.
He visited Hawaii this past April, and many people were able to see his appearances and hear his message. Here are some of the remarks he made during his visit.
We all same human being. Mentally, emotionally, physically, we are same. When I listening your explanation about the meaning of aloha, then I felt, yes, express the word aloha very easy, but implement real meaning of aloha not easy. In order to carry realistic approach, you have to know the reality. So yesterday I mentioned the very purpose of education is reduce the gap, appearances, and reality. World peace must come through inner peace. So healthy body very much linked with healthy mind. So any decision under strong emotion often become wrong. Once we develop warm-heartedness, that means consider all others just like myself. The blind love, not that way. Utilize human intelligence, thorough examine, research, investigate. Through that way, develop compassion. That's compassion combined with wisdom. These practice not depend on religious belief. Without religious belief, we can develop that kind of unbiased, infinite love, compassion. Basic human nature is a social animal. Money, power alone cannot bring together human being. Emotional level, the sense of taking care, sense of concern of others' well-being, that mental attitude alone bring together. There's no other way except try to build this century or century of dialogue, century of peace. Peace through dialogue. Combination, wisdom and willpower combined, I think we can develop. This century can be century of peace through century of dialogue. I believe the very purpose of education is reduce gap, reality and appearances. Rich money, rich power appears, these are the ultimate source of happiness or joyfulness. But reality, not. I think among emotions or thoughts, the real destroyer of our inner peace is fear, distrust. Fear develops frustration. Frustration develops anger. Anger brings violence, positive sort of emotion or positive sort of thought. Love, compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, these things. Number one commitment, promotion of nonviolence, promotion of peace. Nonviolence, peace, you see, ultimately depend on motivation. Not physical action, verbal action, but mental attitude. So wherever I go, on human level, I'm sort of talking to audience on human level about how to bring our life more peaceful, with more self-confidence. As a social animal, without trust, how can live happily? A friendship, social animal, we need genuine cooperation. In order to carry genuine cooperation, you need sense of community, sense of belonging. Yes. And for that, trust is key factor. So just opposite, just destroyer of trust is fear. So open heart is very, very helpful to build healthy family, healthy community. Search for peace does not mean no longer any problem among humanity. Problem will be there, even increasing. So the only way is to deal with the problem, not through violence, not through use force, but through logic, through reason, on the basis of mutual respect. So this generation, young generation, you should realize sort of your heavy responsibility to build happy humanity, happy century. You have the ability. So think more these lines.
He was part of HPU's Intercultural Day celebration, and here are some of the reactions and comments made by the students about him.
And you really learn about each other and reality. Doesn't matter what people look like, you really get to develop true bonds when you have to solve problems together in an educational environment.
Actually, education should come from inside, and what we are still doing now is that appearance that we are doing from what we learn. But it's the process to show it to the public who you are and who we are is that from inside, which is we are learn to know, and also at the same time we have to learn to be.
My role as an active student, if I'm understanding him correctly, is that it's not just learning facts, but it's learning how to apply these facts to everyday life, and then also how to go about and make those actions, because I think it's awesome to be aware of things, so long as that awareness leads us to action and to making a difference in the world around us.
So when you're learning about other cultures and you're traveling around, you actually get the experience, you get the opportunity to experience what a culture, what a country really has to offer.
Today I'm representing at Intercultural Day a Middle East booth. I think that since 9/11, a lot of the perceptions towards people from the Middle East have been entirely negative. But what we're doing today is we're trying to represent a group of people who we think we can educate you on.
This is appearance and reality. Education will, bridge that gap.
We need to know more about his religion and philosophy, why he does this, what does he hope to achieve by it for the Tibetan people and the world. We also want to know if he'll be the last Dalai Lama and what will happen to Tibet without him.
So we spoke with Professor Changju Moon of the Department of Religion at UH Manoa. He has studied in Tibet and could tell us about Tibetan Buddhism and where the Dalai Lama fits in the landscape. What I'm interested in today is Tibetan Buddhism and how that may differ, for example, from other kinds of Buddhism, and where the Dalai Lama fits in all of that, as opposed to other religious leaders who emerge out of or are part of Buddhism. Yeah.
I think that kind of Tibetan Buddhism is very different from different traditions. Particularly, we have several different kind of Buddhist traditions. We can say that the East Asian Buddhist traditions, in which Japanese Buddhism and the Chinese Buddhism and the Korean Buddhism and Vietnam Buddhism will be categorized as the same group. And they had another Buddhist group so-called Theravada Buddhism, including Thailand and the Laos and the Burma and the Sri Lankan Buddhism. And then we had another Buddhism so-called Tibetan Buddhism. But they have two different kind of definition of Tibetan Buddhism. One means the Buddhism exercised in Tibet, and also another definition of Tibetan Buddhism is cultural religious definition. For example, in the Mongolia, and then the Sikkim or the Ladakh, and then Bhutan in Himalayan areas, they believe in Tibetan Buddhism. So we have three major Buddhist traditions across the world.
So what is the arrangement with the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama? It's been going on now for 14 Dalai Lamas.
Yeah, there's 14 Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama systems came from Karmapa. Karmapa was the first reincarnation. Actually, the concept of the reincarnation came from two different kind of sources. One source came from Indian context, because they believe in the next life. And another concept of the reincarnation came from Bon religion. Bon means native Tibetan religion. Over there, they have a concept of wandering spirit. So if somebody else died, they would be reincarnated into somebody else. So two different kinds of traditions make up current reincarnation systems in Tibet.
So if a Dalai Lama either retires or dies, how does his successor get reincarnated? How does that work?
Traditionally speaking, if he died, and then they will have a search committee, and then they will search for the reincarnated Dalai Lama. They have a kind of a process. But now this current Dalai Lama had a lot of different kind of opinions on the kind of reincarnation. One kind of is different interpretations on the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama came from political reason. If he died, China will pick up.
China wants to pick up.
Yeah. Wants to, maybe definitely will pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that kind of same things happened to the Panchen Lama. Panchen Lama is second position after Dalai Lama in Tibetan religious hierarchy.
Yeah.
He died, and then later Dalai Lama picked up and authorized one Panchen Lama, and then China kind of authorized another Dalai Lama, another Panchen Lama.
So it's competition.
But now we don't know the kind of Panchen. We don't know where the Panchen Lama which Dalai Lama picked up.
Yeah.
Where he is, we don't know.
Oh.
So kind of who the Chinese government kind of kidnapped.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't know.
So the Chinese number two is in Tibet now?
Yeah, nowadays he is kind of leader of that kind of Chinese Buddhism.
Yeah.
And the kind of Tibetan Buddhism. So
Yeah.
kind of he's kind of pro-Chinese government leader.
Yeah.
So Chinese government kind of utilize him to.
They selected him.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So do the people in Tibet follow him?
I don't know. I don't know. But when I went to Tibet, most of the Tibetan people considered he will be one of the High Lama, but he might not be reincarnation of Panchen Lama. There's their own kind of the saying.
Yeah. So there's a question about
Yeah.
it.
So the kind of Dalai Lama is very, very worried about his next reincarnation.
Yes.
We also spoke with Brooks Robinson, economic advisor with the Pacific Area Command, PACOM, who has written about Tibet. He talked with us in his individual capacity to help us put things in perspective.
China wants access, must have access for its own development purposes to Tibet. mainly because of the natural resources that are there. There are only a few million Tibetans in Tibet. Interestingly enough, there are about 150,000 Tibetans outside of Tibet, many of them in India, as you know, because of the Dalai Lama's location in Dharamsala up in the northern part of India. But there are also Tibetans in the United States, in Europe, some in Australia, and some right there in other parts of South Asia, Nepal, and Bhutan. The Tibetan Plateau is so important because of the natural resources that are contained there. You have an enormous amount of iron ore, which is a very valuable resource in development processes when you're building buildings and roads and rail and so on. You need iron ore to do that. You have lead and zinc and copper. There's a tremendous amount of copper. But possibly the most valuable resource that Tibet brings forward to China is the water that flows from the Himalayas, the snows of the Himalayas. They flow right down as that ice melts down through the Tibetan Plateau into China and into other parts of South Asia. That water is so valuable because not only does it facilitate the growth of crops, food is important to everyone. I think we all eat food.
Increasingly.
Increasingly so. So that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it, the value of that water, can be seen in the hydropower that it can produce. And it's electric power that's important for development as well. So we have a Tibet that has all of these resources. You have only a few Tibetans there, but you have the 150,000 Tibetans outside of Tibet. And they bring the kind of political pressure that you're talking about. And every time the Dalai Lama decides to take a visit to another country, he raises the level of consciousness, the level of awareness about the Tibetan plight. And it raises concerns, in many cases, in the hearts and minds of citizens all over the world. Now, it hasn't gotten to this point, but imagine, just imagine, if the situation in Tibet, if it were viewed as horrifically as what was going on in South Africa decades ago when Nelson Mandela was in prison and so on, the world boycotted, much of the world boycotted South Africa. The question is, could the nations of the world ever be so concerned? And these immolations that are occurring today are increasingly raising the awareness about conditions in Tibet. And the question is, would nations in the world become so concerned with the condition of the plight of the people in Tibet that they would begin to boycott in some way the Chinese economy the way they did the South African economy decades ago? That's an important question.
Interesting question.
That's an important question.
The Chinese really don't like him running around the world, making his speeches and giving his messages and raising awareness about the plight of Tibet. And when we spoke earlier, you mentioned that if he's able to speak to a head of state in any given country, the Chinese take action, retribution.
Yeah, they do impose their concern about other nations accepting the Dalai Lama in an official head of state visit to a head of state, and they usually respond by slowing the amount of trade. They will pick a product or several products, and they'll take the time to reduce their imports from that country, thereby hurting that country economically. I think I cited, when we discussed this topic, work by Fuchs and Klan. They wrote an important paper, which is a social science research paper at this time, called Paying a Visit, the Dalai Lama Effects on International Trade. And in that paper, they cite they produce a model that concludes that trade is lowered by as much as 8.1% in the countries that the Dalai Lama visits as an official visitor and is received by a head of state. It really is a significant economic impact on the trade of that country with China, and China uses that as a way of sending its message to these other countries that they don't appreciate these other countries bringing the Dalai Lama in as an official head of state visit.
Does it have the desired effect? I mean, are countries declining to entertain him because of this retribution?
Well, yes, he has trouble getting visas in many cases to countries. And not only that, when he visits countries, quite often he will visit many countries but not get an official head of state visit. He will not be received officially to the head of state and given a meeting on official terms. And so he might talk to high-level politicians in those countries. He might talk to the public at large in those countries, but he quite often does not get access to the official head of state.
The Dalai Lama's visit to Hawaii was a great opportunity for us to meet him and understand more about Tibet and Tibetan Buddhism and the wisdom it has to offer us. We're delighted that he came and shared his message with us. We hope he lives long and comes again soon. And now let's take a look at our ThinkTech calendar of events going forward.
ThinkTech's 4 to 5 p.m. drive time radio series on KGU 760 AM continues this week. Tune in to 760 AM for Tech on Wednesday, Asia in Review on Thursday, and ThinkTech Fridays on Friday. Raise your awareness on ThinkTech Radio. And now here's Bill Spencer, president of the Hawaii Venture Capital Association, with this week's Spensation.
Gee, it was only a few months ago that the Innovation Fund got started in Hawaii, and there was all this prospect that we would have startup organizations, through the state. And it's been quiet about that, but I understand there have been serious developments now.
5 or 6 entities bid, and there were 3 winners, and the funds were just granted. So the one I want to talk about, which I'm most excited about, is Blue Startups. Notice that familiar blue word in the name.
Yeah,
that's
sounds
because
familiar.
that's because our friend Hank Rogers is the founder. Hank Rogers put up a big chunk of the matching money that's required by the grant, and they're off and running. And my good friend and just a great person for the job of managing director is Shanoa Farnsworth.
Mm-hmm.
What they're doing is very interesting. It's modeled after some of the top leading edge incubators or startup groups on the mainland. One of them is called 500 Startups. They're part of a global network of startup organizations. So the model is consistent with what seems to be working around the country. And that is to select 5 to 10 startup companies, which we'll call a cohort, because they all start at the same time. Each one of the companies will get $20,000 in working capital so that the leaders can sort of focus on their business and not have to be doing other things to survive while their business is going. And then that will be deemed as an investment. In addition to that, of course, they're going to get a lot of hands-on support from not only the management team, but a whole host of mentors. Well, I think it's a way to really bring together the startup community, the innovation community, the venture community, the angel community. We have a lot of different groups out there, as you well know, that are all trying to help startup companies, but none of them can supply money. None of them supply a consistent, coordinated effort over a period of time to train and get the companies going. So each cohort there'll be essentially 3 sessions a year, 2 long sessions, and then 1 summer session, which will be shorter.
What's a session?
Well, it's basically 4-month training that involves, really a lot of hands-on work with the entrepreneurs. They might have a product already prototyped, which would be ideal, and then the idea is to really position them and get them focused on going to market and getting profitable. So it's a really cool idea. I think it'll be great for our startups, and of course at the end of their session there'll be what's called a demo day, which is the chance to pitch their business that they've fine-tuned over the last several months to investors, especially Hawaii Angels, so they'll be in the loop as well. Very cool idea, lots of great energy, and I'm really excited for them. I think you can find them on the web, Blue Startups. They're on Facebook, of course, a lot of social networking component there, but I'm pretty sure it's bluestartups.com, and if you're interested, if you're an entrepreneur, check it out.
We'll be right back to wrap up this week's edition of ThinkTech, but first we want to thank our underwriters.
Thanks to the Scheidler Family Foundation, which supports a number of educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Miko on Maui and Helco on the Big Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is the Senior Executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company, and CEO of CBI Polymers, a tech company in Hawaii.
The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle & Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Okay, Duke, that wraps up this week's edition of ThinkTech. Remember, you can watch ThinkTech on OC16 several times every week. Can't get enough of it, just like Duke does. For additional times, check out OC16.tv.
You bet, Jay. For lots more ThinkTech videos and for underwriting and sponsorship opportunities on ThinkTech on OC16, visit thinktechhawaii.com, be a sponsor or volunteer, and help us reach Hawaii.
I'm Jay Fidel. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech. You can watch this show throughout the week and tune in next Sunday evening for our next important weekly episode.
I'm Duke Oishi. Aloha, everyone.